would I be able to make it? And, my big takeaway is no. I talked about blinded by the light. All right, as we're adjusting. So today is March 1st, 2021. And I am hoping that last night was our last crazy cold night. I'm hoping it was the last night I have to run a fire to warm up. And I'm hoping that in the next few days, as we turn the corner and finally have some nighttime temperatures above freezing, that this winter will be over. Because it has been a long winter, it's been a hard winter, it's been an incredibly enlightening and intensive learning winter. And what I want to do in this video is I just want to talk about the overview. This is the last one in my series on how to be off-grid, what I've learned in the last few months. So I am by no means an expert, but I think one of the things that happens when you do it the first time is the greatest learning curve. And a lot of people who make videos have been doing it for a long time, so they forget about the fabulousness of the first time experience. So we're going to take a brief break. I'm going to collect myself, and we'll be right back with my overview of lessons learned. So this has been, as I just said, a long, hard winter. The reality is it was much warmer and drier than it is normal for this area. So other than a few snowstorms and a few fabulously muddy episodes, pretty much at the front end and hopefully the back end of my being in this particular place, it wasn't really that bad. And I'll be honest, I checked out for about 3.5 weeks in December. I went back to California and the beach just to visit family while I could get across the border, and also because I needed a break because I was drowning. I didn't have the supplies I needed. But, I'm coming to you this morning, and I wanted to do this right now because yesterday was such a flush down the toilet kind of day. It didn't really get above freezing, and it just makes life so hard when it's cold. And I am so tired of winter, and we are so close to turning the tide and having warm days and warmer nights. One of the biggest issues for me in this wintertime experience is having to prompt myself to wake up to keep the dog covered and under a blanket so he's not freezing. And then also me waking up, between 2 and 3 a.m. to get the heat going so I'm not freezing. And so it's not that I'm going to die if I don't get the heat going on, but the greatest cold snap period is from like 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. So if you can catch some heat before then, it just makes life a lot less miserable. And then I'm worried about the dog. He's 10.5, so I don't want him cold, although he seems to have a really high body temperature. But I am just exhausted. I'm tired of wearing the same clothes. I'm tired of being dirty. It's just harder to clean yourself. I desperately need to get my hair washed. I need a good wash. It's harder to stay on top of everything. And what you can't see around me, and I'm not even going to show you because you can't see it because the stuff in here is so deep. This little tiny 14-foot space is the only place I have of everything that doesn't freeze overnight. So I've got food in here, I have vegetables in here, I have anything liquid in a glass bottle in here so it doesn't break. I have anything electronic that I like is in here because I noticed the electronics when they were freezing at night, they weren't recovering. So this is so cluttered, so cramped, so dirty, so gross, and it's been going on for so long. I am so in over my head and exhausted with it that I can barely hold it together to just get to the other side of this. And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be cold days, but I'm just so tired of being cold. And this is actually, the steel does this weird thing. This is actually the first winter in 10 years where I actually had periods of time where I was warmer, but I also have had more intense cold because of my lack of consistent heat. It's either too hot or too cold. It's very rarely in that Goldilocks zone. So I just wanted to do this like raw. I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I'm so ready for it to be over. I can't stand wearing the same clothes over and over again. Not that I don't do that when it's warm out, but it's just heavy, it's dark, I'm ready for spring. And that's true. So I wanted to do just that little bit right there because I feel heavy, the energy is heavy, and this the beauty of spring is when the light comes out and things start to grow and get green, but it warms up. So even though it's a little still chilly, it's not this just trapped feeling in this massive amount of clutter, trying to wait it out until I get to spring. And that's the hardest thing about living in a tiny space, and for me, the hardest thing about the entire process I've been going through these last 10 years is, I don't know if it's the hardest, it's one of the hardest things, is this constant waiting on nature. And at the same time, that's exactly the experience that I want to create. The difficulty is sort of meshing the Western civilized domesticated world with nature's timing and tempo, and it makes it really difficult. And so I have not reconciled the two, but we are talking about that moving forward. And so the other takeaways are, one, is it's really hard. I don't know if it's something that I'll be able to age into. You know, the whole point of the wood stove was to have something if the power went down, but it's very labor intensive. It's dependent on access to wood. And so I don't know if it's a reality for me as I age into it, because it was a bit of a problem heating evenly and heating consistently and accessing resources. So we will see. So that was one of my big takeaways, is that the wood stove isn't going to work full-time as my single source of heater, even though it is my favorite source of heat. The other thing, the big takeaway, is the grid up, grid down. There's just no way I'm going to be able to survive a grid down situation. I wanted to do this experience because I think all of us are looking at what's going on out in the world and asking ourselves, would I be able to make it? And, you know, my big takeaway is no. I talked about this in previous videos. Nobody off-grid is going to make it unless you are in a singularly unique position. Almost everybody that I have encountered in person and online doing the off-grid thing is heavily dependent on a grid up in terms of providing resources like propane, gasoline, batteries, repairs, food, water. It's just not building materials. You know, most of us don't have the luxury of going out into the woods and doing everything from scratch. Even the hardcore mountain men that I've been talking about, they return to town to buy things. So I don't know what the future will look like. I have learned, though, one, I'm capable at some level. I probably can't age into it. And the reality is it's going to be too hard for me, I think, now I'm not just going to quit and give up, but I mean in a realistic manner, I don't see myself surviving this, because I'm not in a community that's strong enough to pull me along. I would be one of few, and I don't really think I could carry my weight at this point in time. Literally. The other big, another big takeaway for me is the personality type is a, I talked a little bit about this in a separate video, or maybe not, I'm kind of pooping out, is the farmer versus the hunter-gatherer mentality. Very different. When I first started going away from the world in this little tiny trailer situation, I figured out I couldn't hang out or be with farmers and ranchers because that mentality just didn't fit with mine, and I didn't want to work all day every day. Well, the homestead off-grid lifestyle is the same thing. You may not have animals, you may not have a farm, you may not even have a garden, but everybody that I've seen is constantly working on their homestead. It's every day, all day, probably for the rest of their lives. And I am much more hunter-gatherer or scout, like I've talked about. Like, I want to be done, and then I want to move on to other things. I want a portion of my day to be about the physicality of my life, but I don't want to be in a constant state of trying to put things together, fix things, have a lot of buildings, have a lot of stuff that needs to get fixed, just be in a constant state of maintenance. So that was a good eye-opener for me. It's not a personality that I guess I meshed that well with. Surprise! Farmer ranchers I didn't do that well with either. So I am much more the hunter-gatherer mentality. So that was good information and an eye-opening experience for me. The next big thing that I've learned is there was still a lot to learn. Even though I've been living, kind of in the dirt for 10 years, I still had so much more to learn by not having access to electricity or internet. And so I spent a lot of this winter figuring out how to get power. Ironically, yesterday was the first time I tried to power up using the new solar panel. Didn't get nearly enough power, so now I'm like super low, and the only way I will be able to get to 100% in that last trickle charge situation is to go plug into somebody else who has power, and that's really stressful. So it is, I just didn't realize how stressful it would be, and so I'm doing a lot of thinking about how I want to manage my electricity power situation going forward. That was a great big takeaway. Another big takeaway for me was I don't like being in this forest area. So I had this idea of having lived on the plains and out in the wind for so long, but I had a horizon around me, at a 360 degrees. I wanted to be in a more protected environment. I can't stand it. It makes me crazy. The little bushy trees cut off my horizon. I feel very claustrophobic. I can't see the horizon. I can't see the sunrise. And that has been catastrophic for me, both creatively and for my own mental well-being. But the other thing around that, and I don't know the answer to this, is it's much safer to have a lot of brush and stuff around you, because you really can't, like, we're not off a main street here, so you would never know anybody was here unless you you went off the main street and went down quite a ways. Whereas in an open plain environment, a mile over there's a house. So I don't have an answer for that, but mentally and emotionally, I like the open space. Practically, I think trees are a better option. But I don't think I can take it. I feel very disrupted not being able to see around me. So that's something I think that's important to take into consideration. Because also these trees are a fuel resource, whereas in an open area you don't have that. Again, don't see myself getting by in the whole grid down situation. So those are all kind of negative things. I think the positive things are like, wow, I'm here. I did it. Life is so much better than when I first got here. I got most of the bugs worked out with phone, with internet, with electricity, with power, with heat, with food, with water, with propane, with getting clean. So the positive is I worked a lot of these kinks out that I didn't know were kinks until I got here and actually was faced with the experience itself. So that was really good. I feel a lot more confident in my capacity to exist without electricity. I don't know if I will choose to have it going forward or not. I'm still looking for a place to go, and I'm okay either way. In the end, if I want to function out in the world, though, I need electricity. I can't function on the digital platforms without electricity and Wi-Fi. That's just, I know people do it, I just can't do it. It makes me crazy. So that's my big takeaway. The other positive is, I feel more self-confident. I feel much better in Arizona than I did in New Mexico, although I don't know, what the future holds here. I don't know that I'll stay here or not. So all these things are uncertain. But I think, it was a very good experience. I'm extremely grateful to the person who hosted me. I think I'm going to try to get him to do an interview, so we'll see. So I really recommend, finding somebody to kind of buddy up with to get you over that learning curve. To me, that was probably one of the smartest things about all this. He may not agree with that decision, but it was good for me. I don't like the isolation. I don't like being cut off. When I lived in a little town before, I had people I could talk to, and I knew people. I don't know anybody here, and nobody's very social, including the person here. So I feel very isolated, very cut off, and because my technology is very cut off. I don't like it. I like having some connection, contrary to popular opinion, that I just want to sit around and be by myself. So it has been an awesome learning experience, and I am really happy that I did it. And I am looking forward to the next challenge, and I guess that we're going to wrap that baby up. So I hope you got something out of this series. I hope that you feel more prepared if you're going to choose to go forward and do it for yourself. I'm going to just add one more thing. Someone had asked why I'm not showing the products and stuff I use. One is I don't want to promote Amazon. I always promote trying to get it off Amazon if you can. And two, I don't even know, there's not that many things I have that I haven't showed you the brand names on that I would buy again. So I haven't been showing you my stuff and how to get it because I'm not that wild about my stuff, and it's generic stuff, usually off-label from out of the country. So you just get to do trial and error, because you never know till you get it if it's going to work or not. So that's the only other thing I can think of. So with that, we're going to sign off on this series, and I will see you next time.